Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hoping you all can hear me. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar on Accelerating Agricultural Digital Transformation through AI and IoT. This webinar has been co-organized by the ITU, FAO, and the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. This webinar forms an integral part of the ongoing webinar series on digital transformation for cities and communities. My name is Maithili Menon from the ITU, and today I have the privilege of welcoming you all to today's webinar. My colleagues will link the program of today's webinar in the chat. Today's webinar is divided into two main sessions. The first session is dedicated to underscoring the role of digital agriculture in creating sustainable food systems. The second session will focus on leveraging international standards for digital agriculture. Moving on, we're honored to have the opening remarks from the esteemed director of the Telecommunication Standardization Bureau of the ITU, Dr. Chae-Sub Lee. To kickstart today's webinar, may I ask for Dr. Lee's remarks to be shown.
Colleagues and friends, very good day, everyone. The future of agriculture looks brighter every day. I thank you for joining us to discuss the actions required to ensure that this future lives up to its promise. Our planet is expected to host 9.7 billion people by 2050. Sustaining so many lives will demand significant technological progress. Advances in AI and IoT will form a key part of this progress, and ITU is committed to ensuring that the associated benefits are felt by everyone around the world. We share this commitment with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, a commitment embodied by our new focus group on AI and IoT for digital agriculture. This focus group is open to all interested parties. I very much encourage you to join the group's first meeting tomorrow and to welcome like-minded experts to join you. In new technologies, we see great potential to improve the precision and sustainability of farming techniques. Our focus group will establish a basis for new ITU standards to help realize this potential on a global scale. Working together, we will all clarify the contributions expected of us. We will all play to our unique strengths. And with this cohesive model of behavior, we will support meaningful improvements to the quality of life enjoyed by everyone, everywhere. I thank our participants once again for joining us, our speakers, moderators, and of course, our co-organizers, FAO, and the International Organization for Standardization. I very much look forward to our work together to ensure that ITU standards help you achieve your ambitions in digital agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for these insightful remarks and for the encouragement to the new focus group. Moving on to the second opening remarks, I would like to call Mr. Johannes Lehmann, Head of the Business Development Smart Farming at the German Institute for Standardization and also ISO Strategic Advisory Group on Smart Farming convener. Over to you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, also a warm welcome from my side. I will begin the opening remarks as one of the co-conveners of the ISO Strategy Advisory Group, Smart Farming. Climate change is harming the planet faster than we can adapt, and UN warns the tense geopolitical situation caused by the war in Ukraine is worsening already strained global supply chains and those food supply and security. These two serious news of the last month show how important resilience of food production is on the one hand, and on the other hand, the great social responsibility of the agri-food sector to ensure food security and the face of a growing world population in a disrupted global supply chain. Well, what role does the digital revolution of agriculture and the food industry play here? And let me answer like this. The use of modern information technologies such as AI and IoT is not for the sake of digitalization as an end in itself, but rather a means to an end to promote all three dimensions of sustainability. Production methods such as vertical farming, in vitro meat, autonomy, and many more, those support the criteria of sustainable development goals. And here, food production has to be considered holistically. To realize the farm-to-fork scenario, all stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder food value chain have to be involved. Topics such as data interoperability, cybersecurity, food loss and waste have to be addressed in an interdisciplinary way to achieve scale effects and successfully apply modern solutions such as AI and IoT in these areas. So some of you might say that standards complicate and bureaucratize everything unnecessarily. But in fact, standards are needed for market penetration and adoption of modern information technologies. This is confirmed by a large number of different studies, including the study of PricewaterhouseCoopers from 2017, in which 100 farmers were asked where they see the main obstacles lie in the day-to-day work for so-called smart farming technology. And every second respondent named a lack of standards and those a lack of data interoperability. For this very reason, the work of ITU and ISO is central to the future success of digital agriculture and food production and to the achievements of sustainable development goals. The ISO Strategy Advisory Group on Smart Farming has recognized this need and is already tackling the challenge with over 200 experts to identify gaps in the current standardization landscape that have to be filled to realize interoperability across the food value chain. The ITU focus group on artificial intelligence and Internet of Things for digital agriculture ideally complements this by targeting a deep dive into the key technologies of AI and IoT. I look forward for the following interesting contributions from internationally recognized experts on the topic of digital agriculture/smart farming and to lively discussions in the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman, for the enlightening opening remarks and for joining us today, of course. We will now move on to the opening remarks provided by Mr. Dejan Jekojevic, the CIO and Director of Digitization and Informatics Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and dear participants and dear colleagues, also a warm welcome from Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. It is my great pleasure to take part and support today's webinar and together with the colleagues from ITU and ISO. The agri-food systems have been heavily affected by the shocks created by the pandemic, of course, but also natural disasters, wars, conflicts, and number of other challenges. If we look at the one indicator, for example, prevalence of undernourishment, it basically climbed from 8.4% to around 9.9% in 2020 only. So by 2022, we have at least 1 in 10, possibly 1 in 9 people affected globally, and it's getting worse. So this has highlighted the importance of more sustainable and resilient food systems, but also we can understand the feel of urgency we have to act quickly. Digital technologies in particular are proving to be one of the key accelerators and have transformational effect on our economies and societies, including agriculture and food systems in general. The digitalization, use of data, and artificial intelligence in agriculture have an essential role to play to support evidence-based policy, planning, and implementation to improve efficiency and reduce negative environmental impacts and make agriculture more productive, profitable, and sustainable. We can see already how data and artificial intelligence can be an essential help to meet the growing demand for safe and nutritious food, to better manage natural resources, to contribute to high quality growth in productivity, to ensure inclusion, and contribute to acceleration in achieving the sustainable development goals. So the new tools also give new capabilities for decision makers and stakeholders, but we can also see transformational impact and further opportunities to help smallholder farmers and rural communities in particular. And how do we do this? We can provide tools and knowledge products in hand. In this context, leveraging the potential of data and artificial intelligence as accelerators, but also in support of agricultural digital transformation is essential. I think a colleague of mine also made a remark on not doing technology for sake of technology. So I think the transformational effect is quite essential. FAO is championing efforts towards ethical use of artificial intelligence already. I think this is also one very important aspect for us to consider. Some examples include Rome call for ethics in AI, the overall UN work on common principles for artificial intelligence, and our joint work with ITU as part of the focus group. I hope you will be joining as of tomorrow. We can also note a joint ITU FAO paper on digital agriculture in action and artificial intelligence. So this is a very good almost a catalog of a collection of use cases in digital agriculture. And discussions we are having today is very relevant to this. And again, we feel the urgency and it's very timely. We already know that such advances in digital cannot happen without a strong collaboration and cross-cutting dialogues. So we very much welcome all the help we can get from ITU and ISO. Our discussion today offers a common space for creating and sharing successful knowledge and practice in digital agriculture. So we are looking forward to explore new opportunities, solutions to challenges faced by agriculture sector, and to set the path forward. So I'm convinced that sharing and discussing will exchange experience and practice, create stimulating ideas, innovations, and contribute to our common goal. So I look forward to the rest of the exchanges, and thank you again, in particular ITU and colleagues from ISO. Looking forward to the webinar and tomorrow for the start working of the work group. So back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dejan, for the encouraging remarks, for the enlightening remarks, for highlighting the importance of collaboration on this topic. And we were, of course, delighted to have FAO's partnership on the focus group, and we hope to continue working with ISO on the same. So before we move on to the keynote of today's workshop, we would like to provide some general information on how the audience can interact with the other panelists. So if my colleagues can pull up the housekeeping rules. So thank you. So all questions from the audience will be taken during the Q&A session after all the presentations have been given. The participants are welcome to type in any question that they have in the Q&A icon that you see at the bottom. And when submitting the question, please address the panelists that you would like to take up the question. And please note that the recording of this webinar will be made available after the session, along with all the presentation material, and also be informed that the closed captioning is also available. So moving on, we will move on to the keynote of today's webinar. We have an interesting keynote up ahead. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andres Ferreira, who's the Data Asset Manager at Syngenta Digital, and also the ISO Strategic Advisory Group, a Smart Farming co-convener. Over to you.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. All right, well, thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak today and to show you some of the work that we're doing with the ISO Strategic Advisory Group on smart farming. First, let me attempt an approximation to what we're dealing with. So modern farming is a multi-stakeholder system, and there are technologies that have been introduced into farming over the last several decades. precision farming with its GPS and variable rate technologies, then farm management information systems, and the ability to use the data to drive a principled decision making. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we've got a dwindling resource base. We have an appreciation of the large footprint of agriculture, and all of this is happening in the context of climate change. So our goals need to be a little more ambitious, and we're trying to optimize for maximum sustainability, preservation of biodiversity, and optimization of the use of resources while trying to help producers be profitable, sustainable, and have freedom to operate. So as this complexity grows and the number of stakeholders and the interactions and information flows get more and more complex, the fact is that things are complicated. There's different machinery from different manufacturers, each one of which speaks their own language, if you will, and it's very hard to interoperate. So these standards and be it standardized interfaces or data formats, semantics, protocols for communication, and so forth, are required in order for us to be able to interoperate. That being said, we need to make sure that all that we do is really also making an impact on the lives of smallholders and everyone who depends on agriculture for their livelihood, as colleagues have said before. So if standardization is essential for the scalability of smart farming, and for that improved resource use to enable the sustainable development goals, what's the problem? Well, it gets complicated again as we have different domains that are trying to interact, and there's fragmentation in the standardization efforts, and lots of gaps out there. ISO is fortunately aware of this and has created its strategic advisory group on smart farming to address these concerns. The primary deliverable of this group is a standardization roadmap that's going to help ISO approach smart farming in a strategic and intentional way. Over 20 countries have signed on, and at this point, we have I think around 200 experts that are participating, and that number is growing daily. The way that this is organized is we have a core group of representatives from the different countries who are encouraged to have a national advisory groups behind them and support. Then we have a consultative group of representatives from different technical committees and subcommittees from ISO that support them as well, and subgroups where the actual work is taking place, 9 themed subgroups. All of this is being coordinated by Johannes Lehmann and myself, with the very able support of ISO staff. I mentioned the roadmap. It's got 4 fundamental goals: describing the landscape of standardization around smart farming across the whole food value chain, identifying gaps, recommending actions and priorities, and publishing the results as that roadmap document. We have a series of guiding principles, acknowledging the fact that we have a short timeline and limited resources. I invite you to take a look at these in the slides afterward. We talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's many of these that fall into the scope of smart farming. The one I'd like to highlight right now is number 17, those partnerships for the goals. Trying to strengthen the means of implementation or revitalizing global partnerships for sustainable development. We have an opportunity. FAO, owns a series of agriculture-related SDGs. They're generating requirements, those challenges for us to collectively meet. And we have ISO and ITU as standards organizations with a very active community addressing these concerns. So I look forward to the rest of this event and for continuing collaboration with the other organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferrer, for the keynote presentation, which I think has really set the stage for the discussions that we have up ahead. So thank you so much. So we shall now move on to session 1, for which I would like to call upon the session chair, Dr. Rami Ahmed Fati, who is the Director of Digital Services Planning and Risk Assessment at the National Telecom Regulatory Authority in Egypt. Over to you, Dr. Rami.
Thank you very much, Maithili, and good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So welcome to the 14th episode of the ITU webinar series on the digital transformation for cities and communities. And this particular episode, as you have heard, is jointly co-organized with the ITU and the FAO and the ISO. So the title of the first session is Digital Agriculture and Sustainable Food Systems, Trends and Opportunities. The session would be moderated by myself with the participation of an excellent lineup of speakers from the Department of Telecommunications, India, the Agri-Tech Association organization in New Zealand, and the WMO. So my name is Rami Ahmed Fathi. I'm the Executive Director of Digital Services and Quality of Experience with the Egyptian Telecom Regulator. I am also the co-chair of the Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence and Internet of Things for Digital Agriculture, which is deemed to kick off its activities tomorrow virtually over a period of 2 days from 1300 to 1600 CEST time. And I think the Secretariat might, if you can also send or put on the chat window a link for the website for all the experts attending the webinar to register and participate in our activities. So I'll begin by highlighting just a very few remarks on the main purpose of today's session. And as you have heard from the excellent keynotes from the previous speakers, that we have a potential problem of securing the global food chain. We, as everyone knows, nearly 690 million people worldwide, that's 8.9% of the world population, are suffering from a hunger situation. Closely 1 in every 10 people in the world also experienced severe levels of food insecurity in 2019. And by 2050, the global population is on track to reach 9.7 billion people. So we are seeing estimates that to meet such growing food demand, the global food production needs to grow by about 70% in the next few decades. And this indeed puts extreme pressure on the agricultural sector and also extreme stress in order to secure the necessary food with good quality for all these population. So, and the problem is even aggravated more by the environmental problems. So environmental aspects like climate change and water scarcity are expected to even make it more difficult and even more expensive to produce food in the future. And accordingly, sustainability and the dimension of sustainability and in the production of good, healthy food is one of the most pressing challenges of this century. IoT devices in the agriculture industry reached around 75 million devices in 2020, helping farmers to close the supply-demand gap by ensuring high yields, profitability, and protection of the environment. By using digital agriculture through introducing a suite of automated, data-intensive precision technologies, experts propose that agriculture could produce more food on less land with, of course, fewer inputs. So the shift from traditional agriculture to digital agriculture using IoT and AI, including connected services, autonomous systems, big data, precision technology systems in agriculture should be a priority for policymakers around the globe, as this technology is key to address food security and sustainability challenges, as well as offers a multitude of socioeconomic benefits. We have explored in previous webinar versions the fact that digital agriculture will draw on the immense amount of farm data that modern agricultural operations are now generating. As we have previously said, in 2014, an average of 190,000 data points are produced per farm per day. And by 2050, experts have predicted that each farm will produce around 4 to 5 million data points daily. Emerging technologies such as yield monitors and maps, GPS, remote sensing, and robotic milking machines. So each record their own collection of biophysical and production data on the farm, which helps farmers to customize their practices. Digital and cloud-based record keeping and farm management and decision support software are now available for farms of all sizes and production systems, with many farmers affirming that these technologies save time, save money, and improve the quality of life. Accordingly, there is an imminent need to develop standards that will ensure that all these technologies, all these systems will coherently work together, address requirements of all stakeholders while taking into consideration global and regional challenges, including the issue of costs. And accordingly, we see the importance of standardization. Standardization of different components of the digital agriculture is critical to be done in coordination with the right stakeholders and in coordination and collaboration also with all the SDOs working in this particular domain. I think it is win-win for the whole industry. The ITU FAO focus group on AI and IoT for digital agriculture explores the potential of AI and IoT to support innovative practices for agricultural production. The focus group also studies any downside of these technologies within this context, any barriers related to their use, best practices for their optimal deployment, and any other relevant topics. In today's session, we explore the trends and opportunities of digital agriculture and sustainable food systems. And we begin by our dear friend, Mr. Sushil Kumar, the Deputy Director General, IoT, Telecommunications Engineering Center, Department of Telecommunications, Government of India. Mr. Sushil is an officer of the 1987 batch of Indian Telecommunication Services. He served in various parts of the country as head of business units and districts of around 22 years in telecom planning, operations, and maintenance in Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited, telecom service provider in India. In his current role, he has created frameworks for finalizing specifications in M2M and Internet of Things with multi-stakeholders participation, released more than a dozen technical reports in the last 4 to 5 years with various actionable points. He chairs the national committees in TEC to coordinate with ITUT Study Group 20 on Internet of Things and Smart Cities and Communities, in addition to leading many projects in JTC1, ISO and IEC JTC1, SC41. So in today's presentation, Mr. Sushil is going to provide or cover the technology requirements for providing smart services in agriculture as well as in rural communities. Please, Mr. Sushil, limit your presentation to 10 minutes max to give some time for the Q&A session at the very end of the session. I'll pass the floor over to you, Sushil.
Thank you, Dr. Rami. My screen is visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for this elaborative introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants of this webinar. I am really grateful and I feel honored to share my views in this webinar organized by Focus Group on AI and IoT for agriculture. This is a very, very important subject. As already mentioned by Dr. Lee, that the population, global population is going to increase to 9.7 billion by 2050, and more than 68% will be living in the urban areas. Even in India, the more at present, the 35% of the population is in urban area, and that will increase to 50% in the urban areas by 2050. So there will be massive urbanization, land area for agriculture will get reduced. So we need the innovative solutions, the technology to increase the agriculture production. Technology based on interoperable standards would help in economies of scale, and the products or the appliances and machines which will be produced, they will be cheaper, and it will be easier for the farmers to buy those machines. A key technology for digital transformation, that is the IoT, ICT, AI, ML, cloud computing, edge computing, and so many others. So this is a picture like the farmer in earlier days, they were using this only voice telephony. Then they started using computers, then broadcasting, satellite, mobile, now Internet of Things, and data storage and analytics will be used for the IoT technologies. Like there are so many verticals and the smart services which can be provided in the rural community, and the agriculture is one of them. The smart services which we can provide, like smart irrigation, livestock monitoring, weather monitoring, then sensor-based precision agriculture, remote crop monitoring, soil quality testing, the smart warehouse, logistics and distribution, and so many other smart applications will be there. Related to this, like food processing, that is very, very important, like production and storage, better food safety, and the wastage in reduction. Some other verticals which may also be provided in the rural areas, but not related with the topic of today, like the aquaculture, animal husbandry, and the healthcare. Because once we are creating the ICT infrastructure in the rural areas, these verticals may also be made smart. The advantage of using IoT, ICT, AI, ML, and other emerging technologies in the rural areas, that is the water management that can be efficiently done using IoT to reduce the water waste, the soil management such as measuring the pH value and the primary, secondary, and tertiary nutrients, they can be measured using the sensor-based devices. And this data can be transmitted to the server where the scientists, agriculture scientists, they can analyze, they can guide the farmers about the use of fertilizers, which fertilizers and how much quantity have to be used. So such facility can be extended, and it will be quite helpful. In India, we are already having 1551 as a number for the call center number, which can be dialed, which is being used by the farmers from the last more than 20 years as a voice telephony. And the same can be used for the IoT. This infrastructure can be further developed. The crop sales will be increased in the global market. The farmer can be connected with the global market. The environment monitoring can be done. Drones can be used. They will be quite helpful in the agriculture sector. Like in India, there was a locust attack in 2020, and these drones were used in the Rajasthan area of India to resolve this situation. Then technology for smart agriculture, like we need to have the wide coverage for mobility for end users. IoT devices with edge computing facility at the gateway router, AI ML for vision-based analysis of camera feeds from drones and the cloud. That is also very, very important for the storage of the data. So then precision agriculture, it is being used from the last so many years, but earlier this technology was being used in the farmlands, big farmlands, but now with the development of the smartphones and the sensor-based devices, even the precision agriculture can be used by the small farmers, and it will help in the production of the agriculture products. The major challenges in technology implementation for smart agriculture are like the untrained manpower, the standards, infancy, fragmented market coverage and connectivity, and high investment. So, there are some other challenges also, like which are being addressed by various countries, like a digital divide, and the majority of the population in rural areas that depends on agriculture, their income is low, and the language dominance. So all these things are some of the issues, but these issues are being resolved by creating the ICT infrastructure in the rural areas, and the government of India connected around 0.25 million villages. That is village panchayats. That is the cluster of 3 villages we call as a village panchayat, and that is the largest the optical fiber cable network which is being deployed in the rural areas, and for providing 100 Mbps connectivity, which can be further increased to 1 Gbps connectivity. And from there, the telecom service provider and the low power wireless area network can be created, and the Wi-Fi hotspots can also be provided to provide the internet facility to the rural community at their doorstep. And once we are having the connectivity, the sensor-based devices or the IoT devices in the agriculture sector, which are being developed, they can be connected. They can provide the various data, and that data can be used to gather the intelligence. So this the project which in India has been executed, that is called as BharatNet, and around 1.18 million gram panchayats, they have already been connected, and the work is already in progress for the remaining. And even the Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi networks has been created to provide the Wi-Fi services at the doorstep, and that is called PM-WANI. Then this is one of the architecture which GPON optical fiber cable and GPON with GPON connectivity, it has been extended, and various smart applications in various verticals, they are being provided, like in banking, education, healthcare. Healthcare and education, that is quite important in the case of pandemic like COVID, and the rural population and even the poor urban population, they suffered a lot. So these are some of the pics which are taken, like this is the community service center which is operating in some village, and these are the farmers. They are using internet facility in the rural areas of the India. So this internet is not a it is easily available in the rural areas, and only hardly 20,000 villages they are remaining to be connected in India, which are in the tough terrain. And the satellite communication and other facilities are being extended there. So healthcare, fisheries, and tele-education, these are some of the other verticals which can also be extended in the rural areas. These are some relevant standards related with the agriculture, like ISO 11783 serial control and communication data network for agriculture tractors. Then these are the standards released by ITUT, ITUT-L.1700, and its supplements for extending the this optical fiber, radio link, or cellular technology in the rural community for providing an affordable network. And as security is one of the most important item in the case of IoT devices, then ETSI has released the code of practice in 2020, and this is a very good document, like code of practice for securing consumer IoT. And its first 3 specifications, if they are implemented, they will be able to provide the secure IoT devices, and also will be able to help the vulnerability in case the devices becomes vulnerable or they are hacked. Then further related work items which are in progress in study group 20, that is the requirement for deployment of smart services in rural community, use case of IoT based smart agriculture, and framework and capabilities of smart livestock farming based on IoT. So these documents will be quite helpful to provide technical guidance to bridge the digital divide, as well as establishing the smart services in various verticals. They will help in making agriculture sustainable, help in increase in food production, and improve the quality of life in the rural community. Then some of the IoT use cases which are quite useful and are being used in India, like live soil nutrient monitoring. IoT device can measure the soil nutrition and as well as the pH value, or and they can transmit over to the network, and the advice can be extended on the smartphone of the villagers. The smart irrigation system, the remotely monitoring the water pump, it can be made on and off using the mobile phone in a smartphone named as Nano Ganesh. It is in practice from the last more than 20 years. Nano Ganesh device was developed by a startup based in Bangalore. Then drone for farming, I mentioned the Rajasthan, there was a locust attack on the agriculture and it was resolved. The connected machines and agriculture appliances, then the smart green houses, the vertical farming and others can be managed by using the IoT, AI and ML technology. And for this, it is very much required that we should have a sustainable ICT network. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sushil, for the excellent presentation and for keeping the time. I would like to jump right away to Mr. Kenneth Irons, the chairman of Agritech New Zealand in New Zealand. So Kenneth is, of course, a very well-established New Zealander, a company owner and a director who has lived in 5 countries, working for 5 decades in 5 industry sectors. In the health sector, graduated as a pharmacist, then the media sector, the aviation sector, the corporate and commercial banking sector, and for the last decade, the agri-tech sector. So quite an extensive and wide experience. Mr. Kenneth followed a unifying theme, namely how governments and especially how large corporates work with businesses in the medium enterprise segment, such those firms generally with 20 to 100 employees, too big to think small and too small to think big. In presenting to this forum, therefore, Kenneth will apply the lens of commerce to the conversation, emphasizing the importance of AI and IoT and similar technologies to be accessible to businesses who have products that can be more valuable globally in achieving UN SDGs. So I'll pass the floor to you, Kenneth. Please, 10 minutes max, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rami, and good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'd like to make a special welcome to our attendee from the country of Samoa. I think you and I are the only ones who have already seen Wednesday. Everybody else is in Tuesday. So I'm going to take quite a different approach from the previous speakers and the following ones, because I'd like us all to stop for a moment and consider the human dimension, not only the technological and technical dimension, which is obviously the primary focus of today's session. And I'm going to join the technical considerations with the human considerations via the wallet. In other words, via the farm income and expenditure statement. So let's start my presentation and I will share my screen. Can I just check, Rami, that my screen is visible?
Please try to share it. We can see your face.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to draw your attention then to this particular ledger book. And if you look very closely, you can see.
We can't see it.
You can't see it? Just a second. Let me just go back here and quickly go here. Thank you for reminding me. Share, there we go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you. There we go. Right. I'm going to take you to this ledger book. You can see that, Rami. This handwritten ledger book was written in 1932. Now, how on earth would I come by a ledger book from such a long time ago? Well, here's where it came from. It came from a corner grocer's shop in New Zealand. And how did I come by it? Well, it's because the gentleman in the suit on the left is my grandfather, and the person to his left, second on our left from us, is my father. And so I'm going to skip forward to 1958. In 1958, after my parents had married and they'd had 3 boys, you can probably see that it's me in the front left-hand corner of the photograph. But I want particularly to draw your attention to the boy behind me. He's my then 18-year-old brother, Stuart. And why is that significant? Well, because Stuart took over the grocer's shop from his parents, my parents, just like my parents had taken over the grocer's shop from my grandfather. But by the time my brother retired as chairman of New World Supermarkets in New Zealand, which is equivalent to, say, Sainsbury's or Tesco in the United Kingdom, maybe similar sized Coles in Australia and so on. my family personally witnessed between 1932, when my mother was beginning in business life, and my brother when he retired, a complete transition from ledger books to scanning. Now let's take an example from New Zealand farming. Here is a record of the crops planted in a farm in New Zealand in 1924. And here is a report prepared by a very skilled accounting firm in New Zealand for their farming clients to be able to produce an emissions report. What I point out here is that we are looking at one generation in my family in supermarkets going from a ledger book to a scanner, which is totally connected with the entire grocery and supermarket supply chain. And yet in the same period of time, we have in an advanced developed nation like New Zealand, a country with about 50,000 farms, so quite small in the global scheme of things. There's 500 million farms in New Zealand. We have just 50,000 of them here. But in the same period of time, more or less, from around about 1930 to around about 2020, this farming example was demonstrating that we were still using paper. So why is that significant? Because from my contribution for today's discussion is I think it's important for us to consider the human perspective, because these are the things we're dealing with. As Rami kindly noted, I've worked in the airline sector, the supermarket sector, somewhat up from an aside, and banking sector and so on. And in the nearly 50 years of my career, I saw those major industries digitizing as much as 30 years ago. And yet today, we are still talking about digital adoption having to be brought forward in New Zealand, in the farming around the world. So why is that significant? Well, Andres referred to the 3 generations of digital farming, and I won't go into the detail. I just want to draw these 3 particular points here, that in first generation precision farming, second generation digital farming, and third generation smart farming, in the first 2, we really were dealing at paddock scale, and the second at property scale or farm scale. Now, those might be smallholder properties of less than a hectare. They could be large Australian sheep stations of, tens of thousands of hectares. But the important thing about the first and second generation is that you could conceivably argue that the decisions that farmers were making about adopting precision farming 30 years ago or digital farming from 20 years ago, really it was pretty much up to them. But with smart farming, we don't just affect the paddock or the property, there's an impact on the planet. And so really farmers and growers can't, and they don't, claim that what happens in their farm isn't related to what's happening in the planet. So here's my thought. We've all been used to working in or for or alongside large corporates, and large corporates are organized usually in some kind of pyramid. And certainly the chief executive doesn't run from one functional part of the business to another. So if, for example, a bank wants to institute a ERP system using, let's say, SAP, it could be Microsoft, could be Oracle, then the vendors of that software will talk primarily to the IT department. Certainly, if they were going to sell that technology to an airline, they wouldn't go and look for a pilot to sell their technology solution to. But of course, in small businesses, we have a different structure. We have the owner, the farmer, the small business owner, having to run between all of these various technologies. So I want, in this time we've got available, to throw out a bit of a challenge. And this is it. When it comes to confronting the issue of digital adoption across 500 million farms in New Zealand, in the world, of which only about 70 million produce significant economic surplus, the other 470 million are smallholder farms. The traditional approach is that when a farmer wants to be involved, so this is an agronomist on the left, is advising a farmer in the middle of my screen, that we move expertise from the person, we move expertise from the expert to the person with the problem. That's the consulting world, the advising world, the mentoring world, the coaching world. And agronomy is a good example of that. This is a very worthwhile thing to do, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that it should stop. But what I do think we need to identify is that the exponential complexity of technology requires some fresh thinking. And this is my contrarian approach. If a farmer has an electrical problem, they don't attend a seminar, they don't go to a training school, they delegate the product problem they have, they delegate it to a specialist, in this case, an electrician. And so what's going on here is, in this model, farmers are completely used to taking expertise from people on the left and applying it to their farming business, but they're also very good at moving the problem to people with the expertise when it's appropriate. And this is the delegation model. What I'm proposing, I think, is worthy of conversation, is that I think there's an opportunity for us to consider the importance of providing technical expertise on a scale that will enable rapid adoption of technology, but by using the delegation approach to experts rather than by trying to transfer technical skill to millions of farmers. I look forward to the conversation after this, and I'm now happy to hand back to Rami. Thank you, Rami.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Very, very useful and indeed an intriguing set of questions, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. So the last line of speakers, we have Mr. Robert Stefanaski, the head of the Applied Climate Services Division of the WMO. Robert is as I said, he's based in Geneva, Switzerland. He has been working for the WMO since 2005. The division he leads focuses on helping WMO members develop better weather and climate applications for the agriculture, energy, and health sector. He's also the co-lead of Integrated Drought Management Program, which is co-sponsored with the Global Water Partnership. He has a master's degree in agricultural climatology from Iowa State University and a BS in agricultural meteorology from Purdue University. I give the floor to you, Robert. You have 10 minutes. Try to be fast. We're running out of time. Thank you.
I will try, and I'll share my screen, hopefully. Do this. I will be short, I promise. So do you see my screen, and do you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes, and we can see your screen, yes.
Great, thank you. So I'll try to be quick.
Yeah,
so,
Outlook page. I don't think this is the right one.
Sorry?
We can see an Outlook page. I think it's the wrong page.
You don't see a PowerPoint?
No. We can see your original desktop. You have to hide this.
This always happens on this. Let me just try it again.
All right.
And then we'll go directly to the PowerPoint. How's that? Is that better?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So very quickly, and hopefully 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you to ITU and definitely FAO as well, and all the partners. So I'm going to talk about, and thank you for the introduction, looking at digital advisory services for agriculture, perspectives from WMO. We take a look at this, and now I'm having an issue with my screen. There we go. So very quickly, WMO is the UN agencies for weather, climate, hydrology, and related environmental issues. We have 193 members, again, very similar to what FAO does. And just to give you some of the technical areas, a broad range of expertise. As the chair said, I'm an agricultural meteorologist, climatologist, and I've been working for WMO for about 20 years. So we've had several projects with FAO at a very limited country scale, and we came up with some guiding principles on these digital advisory services. So we need a secure data and information flow. We need to leverage digital technological innovations. We need a bottom-up approach for targeting communities. Ensure equitable access on digital services for women and youth. And again, build on WMO projects and activities. And a lot of these also with partners. And I'm glad that the keynote speaker also talked about the SDG, goal on partnerships. And here at WMO, we believe that very, very strongly. So this is just a few slides and what we've been trying to do. We view the problem as, so we have a lot of information with our meteorological services, and we have a website. And then we actually tested this with an FAO project in Senegal and Rwanda, where FAO was able to just go to a main server that was actually based in Hong Kong, and again, get all the weather and climate information that's on this server that is uploaded from the National Met Services. So the one issue that we have is making sure we get the accurate and reliable information on weather and climate. As people know, there's many, many sources out there. And so we try to make this reliable from our member services and other partners. So that's the first concept here of trying to link to what our members are already providing. We also have a network of global and regional centers that are certified. They're vetted by the WMO governance process on providing weather forecasts and seasonal climate forecasts. Example of this is here on this slide of looking at the 3-month seasonal climate forecast. And this is what we call an ensemble. So again, it's just not one forecast, but we're averaging forecasts over the next 3 months from 12 centers, and this is from last year. And this is where it gets exciting for the users and stakeholders, is that from those forecasts, we can develop tailored climate forecast products. So here's actually a forecast in East Africa based on the onset of the rainy season. So again, we've made some good progress on linking, let's say, the global, regional, and in some ways even the national, but then how do we get this to the farmers and the farmers organizations? And so that's really the last mile challenge that we have. Some examples here. We have an example from a project in Lake Victoria. Again, we gave out through the Uganda Met Service a text message every morning at 3 a.m. to fishermen. Of course, it had to be in the right language. And then on the right there was a crop calendar, again, based on with FAO, and how do we disseminate that through mobile phones to farmers in Rwanda. So again, we have some examples of this. I'm trying to build on that. Likewise, this is the Lake Victoria project of where, do the fisher people trust this weather information? Again, 63% for most of the time, 14% all the time. So right there, you're in the 70s. And again, most of the people felt that the weather forecasts were very useful. So looking forward, this is I think my last slide. Again, many of our members have agro-meteorological bulletins. We do have various technical committees, and FAO is a partner with this. So we work hand in hand with them. And so the idea here, we did send out some project proposals that actually were rejected. And so we're really looking to refocus this activity between FAO and WMO, and how we can take these existing products and then make them, basically put on a mobile phone for farmers and or websites. So again, these existing AgroMet bulletins are good for the extension agents around the world, especially in Africa. But then how do we get the information in the farmers' hands? And I take Kenneth's point very well. Where does that expertise have to come from? And I think there's many different models that can work depending on the region and the countries that we're working with. So this is just a brief overview of how we're trying to deal with taking weather and climate information, including data and forecasts, and making it available to farmers in a digital sense, and making that sustainable over time, and stuff like that. So that's my last slide. So I did do that in about 5 minutes. So back to you, Rami.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert, for the and apologies for squeezing squeezing you in this particular time. And let us jump right away to the questions. And let us start by directing a very quick question to social India. So you touched upon the use cases of the IoT and AI, particularly in digital agriculture. Can you please share some use cases in agriculture which really helped the farmers? And of course, I'm speaking from an Indian point of view, from the Indian experience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Like the use case which I mentioned, that works on the earlier it was working on the SMS technology, like the making the pump house on and off using the smartphone. So it could be used earlier by the normal phone also. So the farmer is not required to go in the night to their agriculture land, which may be quite far away from there. And this was the one. And second one, the soil testing devices. They are being developed and from the last more than 5 years, because some presentations and discussions we were having with the startups of the such devices. And these devices are also being used, not in large quantities, but these devices are being used in India. And this greenhouse type of use cases are also being used for the development of mushrooms and other agriculture products. This smart irrigation managements are also being used. So these are the use cases which will be helpful for the farmers. And moreover, as the cellular connectivity that is easily available in the rural areas. So they are connected tractors, the connected harvesting machines. These are have become quite useful, and it is giving more productivity, and the machines do not remain idle, and the farmers get more money, and the work can be done in a faster and easy way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up question as well. Did you have any potential issue with the cost? I mean, the cost of the technology or something related to this particular domain or angle?
Actually, this internet facility is quite cheaper in India as compared to other countries. And the devices, no doubt, they are costlier. They are not in the they cannot be purchased by all the farmers, but it will be better if these devices can be procured at the community level. But some of the farmers are using these devices, but connected appliances and other things, they are being used by most of the farmers. And these devices for making water pump on and off, they are also being used by larger farmers. And moreover, the soil testing device, they are quite less, and they are being used. They are not being used by all the farmers. But the government of India is working on this, and we hope in future most of the IoT and AI-based devices will be used in the country. And it is required that the devices should be cheaper for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your excellent contribution for this webinar. So now over to Kenneth. You mentioned, or you tackled a very interesting angle. It's a new angle, actually, the human aspect. And you mentioned an alternative approach, trying to provide the technical expertise using the delegation model. So Kenneth, from the New Zealand experience, and from your views, what do you think are the key factors impacting the farmers' community acceptance and the use and adoption of technology in an agricultural sector?
Thank you, Rami. I will answer both from a New Zealand perspective and my understanding, limited as it is, of smallholder farms in large numbers around the world. In the ISO work that we're doing, we have some good visibility on big nations, China, India, and African states, and so on. So we've got some understanding of that. What I've really done in my career has worked. I have worked with large corporations who sell to small businesses, and that's given me a perception in the ag sector that farming is already significantly complex. There are multiple externalities which are beyond the control of farmers. We obviously refer to climate, water, and so on. But prices and, a friend of mine here in New Zealand, who is a farmer, likes to say that farming is the only profession in the world where you sell it wholesale and buy it retail. There are too many farmers in the world are price takers rather than price makers. So there is these other two corners of the triangle beside the technological corner. The other two are the sociological considerations and also the financial. And I'm talking about micro income and expenditure statements, annual turnovers in just a few thousand US dollars. If we understand those two, what we don't have is any risk tolerance. So we don't have the capacity for farmers to make mistakes, particularly in smallholder, but even in single-owned farms. And yet we are introducing sophisticated technologies into what is already a multivariate complexity. And so what I think is the debate to be had is how do we support technology in exactly the same way as large corporates do. An airline does not get its pilots to buy its technology. A bank does not get its tellers to, in other words, the people running the day-to-day business. They delegate to people who wouldn't know how to fly a plane to save themselves, but they know how to set up a technology system. So I'm teasing us to considering the same solution set for the farming sector with particular focus on smallholders, that we enable an outcome delivery, not an input or process delivery. If we share the expertise across a large number of farms in exactly the same way as my example of electricians, I think we could contribute significantly to the maximal extraction of value from the technology. And we know that it's, look, how many of us have got mobile phones and we use 5% of its functionality? How much you've got spreadsheets and we use 2% of its functionality? We can't afford to do that on a global scale. We've got massive headroom to capture economic value back onto the farm, but it needs experts to do it, not generalist skill that we want to upskill farmers while they're still trying to deal with all of the other complexities of their business.
Thank you very much. And in such a case, then I think there is a need, there is a market need, first of all, yes, to have a new layer in the market which would actually deliver this know-how and this technology to the farmers. And I would dare say, it is better to be standardized.
Yes, exactly. Standardization is a prerequisite. It's essential, but not sufficient.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think it's, of course, we can talk for hours, but let us have, if time, maybe in the future, you can join our activities in the focus group, and it would be a definite add-on, Thank you very much.
It does fit perfectly with the SDGs, the 17 SDGs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now the final set of questions I would direct it to Mr. Robert from the WMO. You mentioned very clearly the importance of weather, of course, for the decision making. Maybe, of course, we would wanted to have some more information on that. But I want to start the discussion, the final question to you on the challenges of providing weather information to farmers on digital platforms. I think this is a very important angle, and it would help us in advancing the digital agriculture technology forward. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Rami. And I think, again, I think Kenneth's points are well taken. It's a measurable level. So the challenges that we faced, and again, I want to just to reiterate, we are talking about smallholder farmers in many developed countries, and maybe developing. There are private services that do this. But again, trying to get this information to, smallholder farmers. One issue we had on the Lake Victoria project is that you could have a relationship with a cell phone company in one country, and to do the same project, let's say in Kenya or another country, it was a totally different setup. So there is, I do like where the ITU and FAO is going with the standardization. But I think on an operational point of view, there still needs some work on, especially if we're going to develop something across a region. That's going to be quite difficult, again, with the different cell companies. Sometimes, let's say in the Caribbean, that the cell companies are the same. So you don't have that lead-in costs or developing relationships. And then the other issue is understanding the information. And I think Kenneth's point is well taken, but there's this, what decisions the farmers are comfortable making and what expertise we can provide for them. So we hope we can do that by providing, weather data, climate data, weather forecasts, especially to the ag extension officers. But again, we know that a lot of farmers like to make their own decisions. And we also can't assume, I think Kenneth talked about this, the various risk profiles of all the farmers. They're very different. So, some farmers are more conservative, some want to take some risks. So trying to find that blend of information. But I think we still see that at a local smallholder farmer level, the information is still not being distributed. There's issues with the cell phones, who handles the cell phone in the household, things like that. We talk about digital, but radio also plays a huge role in some of the rural areas, especially in Africa. But there needs to be multiple ways of getting the information to farmers. So that's been the challenges that we faced of getting the data in the right format, the forecast, but also the distribution is a challenge, especially across countries. So that's one thing that we found, which I can briefly talk about right now. But excellent discussion so far.
Thank you very much. But you think even if we managed to, to push this information to the smallholder farmers, you think there is a definite value added even at a micro and a medium scale?
I think so, because look, it's hard to know. So for example, if we can give a good weather forecast, for example, very quickly, a 3-day weather forecast, say it's going to rain over that period, or even on day 3 or day 4. That is enough information for a farmer to know what they're doing. So are they harvesting? Are they applying chemicals? All those things, so we don't need to really tailor the information per se on exactly everything they're doing, because that's impossible to do, right? So if we can get them to the point of trusting the weather forecast and saying on day 4, there's going to be a heavy rain event, then they can avoid and make better decisions whether to get the crops out of the ground, to fertilize or apply chemicals or not, depending on whether that will run off or not. I mean, sometimes these chemicals need rain to activate. So again, I think we shouldn't try to assume the decisions, but give the best information at the highest quality to the decision makers and then see where that goes. Again, some of these countries have a good network of ag extension agents. There's also FAO offices, there's country med offices as well. So we need to find the right mix of that information that needs to be provided.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Robert. I think very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, very interesting perspectives, very interesting views, and it outlines, the complexity of the topic that we're dealing with. I'll stop here and allow session 2, of course, to complete. Over to you, Maithili. Thank you very much for the speakers and for your contribution to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rami, and special thanks to the speakers as well, who have guided us through a very important discussion. They have taken us through various use cases relating to digital agriculture and also briefly touched upon the standardization part. But before we move further into that, I would like us to move on to session 2, for which I would like to give the floor to Dr. Sebastian Boss, who is the head of Interactive and Cognitive Systems Group at Fraunhofer HHI, to start the session. Over to you, Dr. Boss.
Thank you, Maithili. Thank you for the very nice introduction. So I'm very happy to have you here in the second session of this webinar. I'm very sorry that we are sort of running out of time, but I think that we make up for it with a couple of talks from a very excellent lineup of speakers. So we are very lucky to have the opportunity of listening to presentations by Jörg Dörr, by Drake by Drake, Patrick November, and Jim Wilson, who will share their perspective and insights on how to bridge the divide in data-driven agriculture by leveraging international standards and digital transformation. And I'm very happy to moderate this session. It's a very, very nice, it's a perfect ramp up for the focus group that is going to have the first meeting tomorrow, the focus group on AI and IoT in digital agriculture. And I can just invite everyone who's attending here to join our meeting tomorrow. Anyhow, so now I'm very happy to hand over to Jörg Dörr, who will give us a presentation in which he shares his insights on the challenges of data management in the agricultural domain. Jörg holds the chair of digital farming at the TU Kaiserslautern in Germany, and he has a multitude of different positions in which he explores and consults on the relation of digital data management in agriculture. Jörg, I'm very curious about your talk. Looking forward to it. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for introducing me, but also for inviting me here to this webinar. I'm really looking forward to giving this talk. You should be able to see my screen.
Yes, we are.
Good, perfect. So I just want to introduce with my notion of digital farming. I'm not separating digital farming and smart farming, but what I want to share with you is that we get more and more data for our agricultural domain and for harvesting in our artificial intelligence systems, but we also get more and more IT systems in that. So for the digital farming, we see a plethora of different kind of systems. Why is that? Because we see here on the blue area, different kind of embedded systems, sensors, actuators that are delivering data, that are monitoring data, the sensors here, also a lot of IoT equipment here. And we also have the large machinery, the autonomous systems, the tractors, the large implements, the harvesters that we have here, and cyber physical systems. And on the same side, we have the information system world developing from single information systems like geographical information systems towards full-fledged connected farm management information systems, even platforms of farm management information systems. And we can use the data that comes from mobile systems, from the smartphones, and from the tablets that are out there. And all these kind of systems together, in addition to the biological ecosystem, actually form a digital agricultural ecosystem. So many, many devices. So for me, this is the software supported optimization and automation of agricultural work and business processes, and innovative business models is digital farming. And inside that, you see we have so much data. And of course, the people who want to use that data, the artificial intelligence experts, they would like to access easily all this data. And that's why this notion of data spaces or connecting the different data sources comes into play. But we see that the data management is not an easy task. Why is that? If you look at the status quo, the challenges in the digital agricultural ecosystem, we see a strong segmentation of the whole domain ecosystem in very small isolated ecosystems. And that's what I try to depict here in this diagram. You see these islands. You see different kind of platforms. They connect these green bubbles, which are solutions, different ways of digital farming solutions. And the end users, they use the platforms. But unfortunately, these kind of different platforms are not so strongly connected as we would like to see it. So we have a strong segmentation. And in an ideal case, we have some bilateral connectivity between the systems or between the different kind of platforms. So that means even though we would have theoretically a lot of data around, we have a hard time accessing this data. So that's the point, this observed challenges. It's really hard to get the interconnected entities from different digital ecosystems, which I call the islands here in this picture, for the specific agricultural production processes. And the data from the specific assets, like the different fields, the animals, the farms, or the machinery, is often stored and distributed across multiple software solutions and digital ecosystems. So even though I have the data from one field, I have different fragments in the systems of the different entities. The data is then often stored in a proprietary manner, and the interfaces for data access are either not available, so you don't have an interface to get to that data, or you get an interface, but you don't really know how to access it because it's not really sufficiently well described. And that is, of course, a kind of problem if you see that we want to get an access to a multitude of different data objects. What is the really big issue here is data sovereignty. So the farmers, they tell us that data sovereignty is a really big issue here. And the farmers that tell us about this data sovereignty, they also say that there are different mechanisms and the different kind of systems. The agricultural work processes are really complex processes, and in the digital ecosystem architecture, as well as in the multitude of entities and actors that we have an overwhelming challenge for the farmers, as there are so many different kinds of products and services. So how to solve that? What is the approach to solve that? So there are really different approaches to working with this data. The one approach is, as the state of the practice currently does, you have a decentralized data storage. So the data is distributed among different kinds of entities, and you establish direct connections between the entities. If you do this without the help of a framework, you will always end up in a scalability problem because you cannot directly connect the different thousands of digital farming solutions. So that's why in this first version, the version A of how to build a data space, often frameworks are proposed to be used in order to help with the scalability problem. The second part of how you can do it, that you make a data space by data routers. What they offer is they offer a service to transport data from a party A to a party B. And the third part, which is still quite rare, is the offering of data hubs, where you store data and provide an interface for the third party. So you try to put the data into one area. So the big difference is, while the data router only transports the data from a producer to a consumer, a data hub stores the producer's data and makes it reusable for the third party actors. We believe, and what we see out there is that in a digital domain ecosystem, combinations of these paradigms exist. So just to give you some examples of the approaches that are out there, here's an example, the project Gaia X, maybe you heard that. It has a strong European origin, and it aims at making a kind of data sovereignty, you can say a kind of middleware for a variety of domains, among them here the agriculture domain, where they say independent of the infrastructure ecosystem that you have in the lower layer, you have the so-called Gaia X Federation services that ensure trust and sovereign data exchange, and they provide a catalog of all the data and the services that are available. So these kind of services will be built up. Still, the data will be decentralized. Every kind of provider will have an own data storage, but with the help of this Gaia X framework, you can have rules and define standardized services how the data or the services can be accessed. And for example, the project Nalanki, it's a project that Sebastian Bosse and I jointly work in from the German ministry. It's about using artificial intelligence for sustainable agriculture, wants to make use of this framework once it is developed. It's still in the definition and ramp up phase. An example for the second architecture, the data routing, would be the agri-router solution. You see here, there's a component, a service in the middle, and you can have different kind of applications, information system applications like a farm management information system, as well as different kind of other systems like the dashboard that you have on your tractor or the implement. And the idea is that from the farm management, the data is routed to your tractor. In the terminal, you can then access it, and via defined standardized interfaces like the ISOBus, you can use it for your implements. And once you have this kind of application map executed, you can store the documented way of how you, for example, fertilize the field back to your farm managed information system. And the data routing, the agri-router takes care of the routing. And a third example here is the use of data hubs. A data hub doesn't mean that there is only one source where the data is stored. You can even have multiple data hubs in your agricultural ecosystem. And to this hub, the IoT sensors can write the data, and the AI people can get the data from the different kind of hubs. Anyway, we will have a big problem in our data ecosystem with the data management, which is the decentralization of these different kind of approaches. So we expect that the agricultural ecosystem will remain decentralized, and we can expect that the number of services and data that are available will increase, and the diversity is still growing. So the question is, how can we handle this complexity? And the good news is there are already concepts working, the research community and the practitioners community are working on how to manage this. And the key point is how to manage the access to the data. So there are approaches like the digital twin approach that say, why don't we make a conceptual belonging in our head? So we say the farmer thinks in his field, in the animal, in the farm, and he doesn't think in system XYZ. So that will maybe change also the way how we deal with these things. So what you see, we want to have like one conceptual agricultural data space that connects different cloud solutions. And for this interaction, we need a variety of different concepts, novel concepts, but also standardized approaches how to deal with that. So, for example, we see the whole topic of vocabulary and ontology. We are very grateful that there is the FAO AgroVoc also. There already standardization activities are going on. But you see a lot of concepts on this slide here on the lower part, which we need in order to make this vision of agricultural data spaces come true. A lot of IoT connectors, cloud connectors. We need service registries, we need cognitive services, data usage control for expressing the data sovereignty, the whole concept of digital twins. And we still have quite a way to go in order to also have standardization as support in order for these concepts not only to become reality, but also have a huge impact and support our visions of agricultural data spaces. Thank you very much for this a little bit more technical talk. I hope there were some kind of interesting aspects in this talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jörg. That was very insightful. I will not lose time at the moment, so we'll directly dive into the next presentation by Drake Patrick Mirembe. Drake is a senior ICT consultant, and he also wears multiple hats in the area of digital agriculture and in the digitalization of agriculture in Uganda. So I'm very much looking forward to hear from him about his experiences in the process of digitalization of agriculture in Uganda. Drake, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. I will. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I'll use a short period of time. My talk is really about sharing our experience of what we've done in the last 12 years across the continent, but particularly in Uganda as far as digitalization is concerned. I will skip this, not bore you on time, but just to appreciate that we're a country of about 48 million people. We have about 37% of our land is arable, with a growing higher education sector. Our internet penetration is about 47%, and the access to communication service about 70%. And more importantly, for us is that agriculture is a mine backbone, whereby 75% of the population rely on agriculture, which is even subsistence in nature. So critically, we are also having the fastest growing ICT sector and a growing urbanization, and with a number of challenges as I will share with you. So when you look at agriculture, as I've already said, that it provides about 25% of our GDP, provides 47% of our employment opportunities, and critically, our population is really young, and majority of the people working in agriculture are actually women and the youth. In terms of export earning, for a long time, except in the last 3 years, agriculture has been significantly contributing nearly 70%. Now minerals have sort of caught up with, and we see, but still we're predominantly agriculture economy. So as far as what are the challenges of a structure that make or provide opportunities for digitalization? So one, that we have limited access to quality inputs, and that's an entire issue from the value chain analysis, right from production to delivery, limited access to quality markets, poor extension services and weak tools of monitoring extension delivery. So you have limited access to financial services, limited quality of information at various levels along the value chain, right from pre-production, during production and post-production, and also pest management, among others. So when you go to this, the key question is, what could be the role of ICT? So we know that digitalization provides us about 3 major elements in any process and value chain or business process. One, it enables you to capture relevant information that you need and to store it in a way that is easy for you to access. Secondly, it helps us to improve visualization and information exchange. But all these 3 elements work together for the sole purpose of enhancing your decision-making. And in knowledge-based economy, those who have information, they make better decisions and they take better opportunities in life. So as you can see, there are different digitalization approaches that will be available along the value chain. For example, you have information management systems around when you're trying to do pre-production, information you need for making a decision on which value chain to invest in, when to plant, as you've seen, for example, the weather information is very, very critical, and many others. I want to, for the interest of time, to speed up very quickly. So we've seen in our own part of the world that digitalization can greatly enhance access to critical services. For example, capacity building. We have very few extension workers, but we have very many farmers. How do you reach that one? And you have approaches coming through digitalization. Financial inclusion. Previously, it was unheard of farmers to get insurance because of poor record management and the thereafter computation of credit worthiness. Today, with digitalization, you are able to actually to insure your crops. Extension services, and not only just delivery, but also monitoring, among others. But critical element that really comes out strongly is the issue of access to market. So in this part of the world, we produce a lot. Actually, farmers spend a lot of time in the field trying to produce, but developing quality markets where the farmers can get the value they need is a challenge. So with digitalization, you have right information to package your produce, to aggregate your produce with small farmers so you can access the right markets. So about 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, the Uganda Communication Commission commissioned a study to document the state of evolution of digital agriculture in Uganda. And we observed that about 200 agriculture for innovation, ICT for agriculture innovations were identified at various levels of development. And majority of them were still under idealization, a few under prototypes, and very few on commercialization. A few standout projects or initiatives we can note for. We have ICT for farmers, which is largely supported by Uganda Communication Commission. They use a distributed virtual call center service, providing services in about 10 languages and across the country. They have an e-agriculture academy with about 55 e-courses that is available for extension workers, for farmers, for other value chain actors to learn at self-paced learning. Then we have a mobile application for market access and others. Then there's e-voucher system where farmers can access inputs from the government and many of these others. And I'm happy to see colleagues who talk about weather, because we also have a project led by Makerere University with the Meteorological Department of Uganda to provide weather information to farmers. We've also seen baby steps being taken in use of artificial intelligence, particularly image processing techniques, to improve crop disease diagnostics and variety identification in a number of areas. So what are the key lessons? I'm trying to rush through this because my interest is to give the lessons and maybe the way of action. One, we observe that digital technologies are mainly used along the pre-production and the post-production stages, at least in this part of the world. Most of the locally developed innovation technologies are really targeting crops, and maybe just because our sector is largely crop-based, that would be the reason. The level of education of farmers and the motivation of farming So when farmers are looking at commercial farming, they are easily adapting agricultural technologies. But those who are really doing subsistence farming, the motivation of adoption is very low. Not surprising, we observe that really the uptake of IoT and the AI are still at infancy stages. There's also limited sources of energy. So power distribution in this country is still low. Compared to our regional neighbors, Kenya is about, for example, about, I think, 85%. And Ghana, I think, is about around the same range. And I think about 40% in terms of access to electricity. So there's also a big challenge of unregulated agricultural content. So this gray material sometimes creates confusion and sometimes creates a turn-off effect on the farmers. There's also a huge digital divide attributed to skills, attributed to level of connectivity. For example, most of the 3G network is concentrated around urban areas as opposed to rural areas where majority of the farmers live, because it does not make business sense for operators to deploy these services in those areas. We have the development of e-services is still at infancy stage, and the entire ecosystem is really very at infancy stage. Network coverage and quality of service, a huge challenge. And of course, one thing that we noted is that majority of these initiatives driving digitalization of agriculture are largely project-based, which are social programs. So which means the issue of designing sustainable business models stands out. So what are the areas of action, which is the message I bring on this forum? Is one, there's really need to promote universal broadband and connectivity and inclusive access to digital services. There's need to promote open agricultural knowledge platforms so that there's no need to require reuse of content, reuse of technologies. Some of this information is the same, and I've liked the fact that there's a standardization of connectivity and ontology. So all these issues need and they will accelerate access to this information. We note that skilling is a very key problem, and the approach of skilling, particularly using blended learning and integration into civil service, civil education program would enhance. There's a need to promote sustainable and relevant low-cost e-service solutions. So the cost of affordability and value creation is a challenge, and that must be looked into. So as we deploy these digital agricultural technologies, particularly for smallholder farmers, there's always a need to find out what is the cost per gain and what is the value we propose. Then there's a need to nurture a supportive agriculture-based innovation ecosystem. We observe that different countries, different regions may have unique needs, and the best approach is really to develop technologies that respond to the unique needs of these farmers in these ecosystems. The other area of action is really making device and internet affordable and accessible, especially in this part of the world where internet is still very expensive compared to other regions of the world. Another thing we've noted, critical for action is e-waste and electronic device management. As we promote the digitalization of agriculture, there has been a proliferation of counterfeit and substandard devices, which of course cause hazards and lead to accumulation of e-waste. So this should be in the framework of adoption. There is need to really look through the issue of e-waste and electronic end-of-life management. Power accessibility. So as whatever framework of digital agenda, there's greater need to promote access to power, particularly in rural communities. And in Africa, we have a challenge because people are sparsely populated in the communities, so extending a grid may not address the needs of everyone. So solutions like solar and prosumer approaches, whereby you have community-based grid systems, would actually be a good approach, particularly as we look at digitalizing agriculture in these parts of the world. With that, I wanted really to showcase, just highlight a few kind of systems. For example, this is one of the ICT for Farmers innovation. Well, if you want to do to start any project, you want to invest in agriculture, you can take an enterprise selection service. It allows to give you advice, you provide some questions, your profile, and with that profile, then you are able to be advised which enterprise is ideal for your kind of profile. Resource sharing, for example, if there's a farmer in the community, they own a tractor or they have a storage facility, and this leads to optimization of service of resource utilization, but also improving productivity and overall benefit the farmers get. So if there's a tractor in the community, people can know that there's a tractor in the community and they can book it, they can share these resources. So resource sharing, we found it in our practice. It's basically an African kind of practice of sharing things. So resource sharing is one of the most popular modules farmers find in using. This is like one part of that platform where the virtual call center service runs. So you can see here some of the calls come in, they are recorded, and then later on, they are provided service that they need. So these are some. We have a national seed tracking system. The problem we had was really the seeds being counterfeit. So right from the breeders to the store, you can be able to trace a seed even from the first generation to the 10th generation. So if you buy your seed from the store, you can, by scanning a QR code or the barcode, you can actually know who was the very first breeder, who produced it, all the processes along the value chain. So that's like one. Also, this application allows us to predict the seed demand so that the seed breeders can produce seed for the following seasons, knowing the kind of demand that is coming from the farmers. And a lot of others. It has an entire module, and it's being run by the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industries, and Fisheries. Allow me end here. This is here was in the field in one of the districts in Uganda, Eastern Uganda, using a TensorFlow based model, which we ported on a mobile phone to actually try to test virus, to diagnose sweet potato virus diseases, but also differentiate varieties, which is a very big problem because of limited extension manpower. You have to provide simple tools to farmers to be able to have such a high impact interventions. Sebastian, thank you very much. I'd like to end there my discussion.
Thank you, Drake. Thank you very much for your presentation. We will directly continue with Jim Wilson. Jim is the Chief Technology, the CTO of Arc Gateway. He has worked in industry and global interoperability standards for more than 20 years and currently serves as a president and CEO of the Open Applications Group, and as mentioned before, as the CTO of Gateway. And he's also involved in the standardization efforts of ISO. Jim will answer the question for us: what does acceleration actually mean when we talk about accelerating the transformation towards digital agriculture? And I'm very keen to learn about that. Jim, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sebastian. And thank you all for attending. I guess maybe the first illustration of acceleration is I would love to have 10 hours instead of 10 minutes to go over what what this topic means, but alas, 10 minutes. So we're going to accelerate. So Sebastian laid out my roles at Gateway CTO. I'm involved in the strategic advisory group with Smart Farming, along with Andres and Johannes. I chair subgroup 9 supply chain. I'm also involved in the Industrial Ontologies Foundry and in ISO TC154. I'm the head of the US delegation and the convener for Working Group 7 Digital Business. All right, so the webinar's title is Accelerating Ag Digital Transformation Through AI and IoT. So what does that mean? So I'm going to address this first at a conceptual level and then enrich it with a story. So we have emerging requirements, and where we need to go is we need a solution with full interoperability. And along the way, certain stepping stones are our process, landscape, and then ultimately developer resources. So the idea here is you have a requirement. Okay, what is the process? Let's start there so everybody's on the same page about what is happening and what we have an opportunity to improve? And then what is the standards landscape? What are the tools at our disposal? Who's doing what? Are there opportunities for collaboration? And then once you've sorted that out, then, okay, what are the resources available through these various organizations or partnerships? And how can I get the right resources to my developers so that they can actually implement a solution that results in full interoperability? And so where we've been over the years is, something like this may take 24 months, or maybe you can speed it up and get it done in 12 months. Or let's say we have the growing season coming up and we need it done in 1 month. Or boy, there's a 2-week window. We need it done now, or else we're going to miss an opportunity to address this requirement. And so what I've seen over the years is this compression of standards development activities or resource identification efforts. And so let's back this up with a story. And we're going to talk about an emerging requirement for support for carbon measurements and soil testing. Okay, late last year, there was the COP26 conference in Glasgow. And at that time, Andy Beadle from BASF was scheduled to deliver an Ag Gateway conference keynote presentation, which he did, but he had to do it remotely because he was at this COP26 conference. And during his video presentation in the plenary session, I handed a guy next to me, I handed the guy a note and I said, hey, a major crop input company hasn't found standards that specifically address soil testing for carbon. Is this an opportunity for Ag Gateway? And the person I was sitting next to, immediately, he had been scribbling at the same time I was, and he handed me this piece of paper. It's just a simple UML sequence diagram. Okay, so right there, we have a requirement, and the first thing that's going through somebody's head is, well, what's the process? So later that evening, I took that process, I formalized it into more of a pretty picture, and then it raises the question, okay, so now we have an opportunity, we kind of have some quick basic ideas sketched out about what the process is. So what is the interoperability landscape that's related to soil testing for carbon, or carbon testing for soil? And this is a common problem. We hear this all the time. We see these patterns all the time. We hear people say, what is X? Where X is a standard, a technology, a solution? People are just like, well, what is that thing? How does that thing relate to this other thing? How does soil testing relate to water testing? Is carbon special in some way? What's the difference between X and Y? Why do I need X if I have Y? Why do I need this technology if I have this other technology? Which is better? I can only choose one. Which should I choose? So all these questions come out, and included in them is, where did something come from? I don't want to assign a bunch of development resources to do work on a technology or a standard that's a dead end. Okay, and then who is using it? So interestingly, I had this prepared before the presentation, and during this webinar, I noted that Gunnar Crawford asked in the QA a similar question. He says, for something new, someone new in this field coming from smart cities, where should I start to get a good overview of existing and proven IoT solutions, tech platforms and services within agritech? Is there any business clusters, organizations, or others who have gathered this information? And the same goes for training. Where to begin with this huge field? I hear this kind of question all the time. People are really struggling to be able to answer questions like this. So what do? Well, there's too many things, too many interrelationships. Two-dimensional is insufficient. We need a tool to manage this, and we need a team effort to input data. And fortunately, ag is not the only industry with similar questions. Biopharmaceuticals has these questions, human resources, the chemical industry, aerospace and defense. I'm involved in all these industries, and they all have the same basic set of questions. And so in our Gateway and other organizations, we've been working on developing a tool to help manage this information. I mentioned a moment ago, two-dimensional won't work. It's not, putting data in an Excel file is insufficient. We need some sort of graph representation of data. And so we've been working on developing a tool to help manage this sort of data and help make connections between standards and technologies and business and social concerns and UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then to produce reports that help people understand the standards landscape. So then once you have some idea of the standards landscape and know what opportunities, what resources are available to you, how do you choose the exact resources to then hand to developers so that they can make interoperability happen? How do they get APIs and schemas and supporting documentation, et cetera? And so back to the example, we had our event, our keynote address at 15:47. I think there is a window covering things up. There we go. So we had our event on November 10th last year at 15:42, and then 18 hours later, we're delivering some resources as an example, just kind of a proof of concept, not fully completed, but the idea is we have a new requirement, and within 18 hours we can say, okay, here's a starting point that we as an industry, as an agriculture industry, can rally around and fine tune and then hand resources to developers so that they can implement interoperability to seize the opportunity to meet a new requirement. And so that is exactly what I mean, or that's what I think of when I think of acceleration, from requirement to interoperability in days or maybe a couple of weeks. It cannot be years. And helping to make this happen, at least in the world I'm in, is a collaboration among all sorts of resources and organizations and groups. We use, like, for example, ISO 15000 Part 5, implemented by or developed by ISO TC 154. We work with the Open Application Group on RESTful Web API design guidelines. We work with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of the US Department of Commerce. And we're participating in events like this. I mean, just to think about like the Gaia X platform that Jörg talked about, that is on many people's radar, and many other people aren't even aware of it. How do we bridge these gaps? How do we help people understand what the landscape is and what the tools are available to them so that they don't just throw up their hands in frustration and say, there's too much, I'm going to start over and create a new thing that just serves to make things difficult for the people that follow them. And so with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was a very interesting presentation. So we have a couple of minutes left that I would like to use for discussion. I have plenty of questions. Let me start with one question that sort of addresses several presentations we had today at once. So in the first session, we had this presentation by Kenneth, where he emphasized on the smallholder aspects, smallholder farm aspects in agriculture and digital agriculture. And this was something that came up in Drake's presentation as well, where he referred to the smallholder infrastructure environment ecosystem in Uganda. And then Jörg gave in his presentation an overview over the challenges in data management and different concepts underlying this. So my question goes at first to, maybe we start with Kenneth. So how do you see how these concepts that Jörg presented apply to the ecosystem that you described in your presentation?
Thank you for your question. It's interesting, there's a chat going on at the side at the moment where a Marco raises a point that we didn't have time to touch on, and that is the point at which farmers tend to create the first digital imprint or the digital entity of any piece of farm information. I still see, even in New Zealand, which by global standards is an advanced economy, well-educated workforce, high broadband coverage and so on, a tremendous lot of farm information is captured in an analog form, paper, whiteboards, text, phone calls and so on. And it's not until the information is transferred into perhaps a fertilizer supplier or a chemical spray supplier, or maybe a farm product is shipped off the farm and moved to a buyer that might be a large processor, a meat company, a milk company, or so on, that information becomes digitized. The point I'm making here is that the point at which the digitization happens is often outside the farm fence. And at that point, the farmer has already given away control of that data. And so uniquely in the ag sector, we see farm information, unlike any other industry, business information is first aggregated by business and second by function. You think of a bank. A bank has information about their creditors, their depositors, their staff, their payroll, their rent. All that information is captured by the bank business first and then subdivided by function. In farming, we tend to aggregate data by function and then try and re-aggregate by farm. And so, for example, in New Zealand, I know in many other countries as well, a farmer will, 10,000 farmers will store all their fertilizer data with their fertilizer co-op. But then their water irrigation company will capture and store and aggregate all their information about their irrigation water. And maybe another firm would have 10,000 soil moisture probes on 5,000 farms. And all that data is captured by the soil moisture provider. That's an unusual scenario. That doesn't happen, largely speaking, in other countries, in other industries. So what I'm espousing in this is to consider how we overcome the fact that there are 6,000 airlines in the world with all enough budget to spend 300, 400, 500 million on an ERP system and then 20, 30, 40 million dollars a year to run it. Same with banks. There's 25,000 banks in the world. There are 30,000 supermarkets in the world, but there are 540 million farms in the world. How do we address the macro socioeconomic issues of that reality, which is not going to change? We're always going to have 500 million farms, but how do we provide a farmer with a gross annual revenue of a few thousand US$ through to a single owned farm that might be 2 or 3 million local dollars, or it could be a large corporate farm, by which stage they do start to have a central office and maybe a technology specialist. So I'm not so concerned about them, but smallholder farms and single owner farms, we have a problem to solve. And that is the ability to acquire expertise on a as needed basis, like you buy electricity or the services of an agricultural contractor. How do we address that problem? Because we have exponential complexity with ever increasing sophistication against a limited brain bandwidth of 1.6 billion people to be able to keep up with the rate of change of technological development while being pressured by the external demand for increased yield, increased productivity, and decreased impact on the environment. That is what is known in economic terms as a wicked problem. And without addressing the sociological and anthropomorphical issues, we will not achieve the objectives that we have for the primary sector.
Thank you. So let me just quickly reiterate on that. Do you think that this sort of sets up requirements for data management systems as well? I mean, you just explain to us how the relation between, let's say, the structure in the financial economy, for example, is. So they have data management systems that are sort of established, and now we are thinking, Jörg gave us a presentation on that, how to establish data management system in the whole environment as well. And from your perspective, where you take a very sort of user-centric perspective, do you think that this has some sort of consequence, this perspective has some sort of consequence for the design of data management? And please, just like in a sentence or two, maybe.
Sebastian, very much so, yes. Look, there's a suboptimality in the train smash, if I can use that, between exponential complexity, pressure on productivity, and you might call it a sinking lid in climate, carbon, and so on. You put those three big vectors together into a market that is not 6,000 banks or 30,000 airlines, it's 540 million farms. That's a solution. That is a solution that is yet to be found, and I'm proposing a dialogue about that to put all the brains in this webinar and many more beside to work on that problem. Sure, we need to solve the technological problem, the financial challenges, the environmental challenges. I think we've got a sociological and human dimension to consider equally.
Thank you very much. Drake, I would like to ask you basically the same question. So how would you see, how does this this question of optimal data management reflect onto the ecosystem that you have experience with in Uganda?
Okay, thank you. I go straight speaking, which means problem solution. The problem is data management, and the issue is lack of standardization. Even in Uganda, when you tried, we tried to, there are some existing systems, we said, okay, can we pick some data from these people? The data cannot come. So there are two, I believe, practical solutions to that problem. Problem number one is non-technical, particularly when they're dealing with smallholder farmers. The farmers must be aggregated so that they can have an aggregated demand. Instead of dealing with one farmer, with 100 farmers, you deal maybe with one farm group, which has more people. That's one. But on technical perspective, we need to come up with a reference framework and create standards and distribute awareness of these standards so that any person building an agricultural system adheres a set of standards so that data can easily be shared among different systems and cut across different frameworks. So to me, that's the shortcut. So if you create a reference framework, more likely, and for example, have an e-governance framework. We never had one, we had silos of automation, but now with an e-governance framework, different ecosystem players can be able to pick data and speak to each other. So in agriculture, it's the same. And if you have a globally acceptable framework, then it doesn't matter who build what. You can build, for example, an API on agriculture finance, and they can consume that service, even if it's built maybe in Estonia and in Uganda, and then in Uganda, maybe I can build something on extension service or crop disease surveillance. So the work is we put our heads together, develop a global framework that defines the declaration of agriculture, providing guidelines on different developers of technology. I submit.
Thank you. So Jörg, when we talk about the digital data management, then we sort of have different characteristics of the data. So we have public data, we have private data, and at some point they are going to be fused in some sense to be leveraged by other services. Who is it in the end to whom this data belongs? As well for the public data as for the private data. So if I have a private, I have a startup and I'm going to provide a very nice service. I use public data. How is that tackled? And then I might, because you're a farmer in my example, then I use your data for my service. How is that tackled?
I think the key that you already say is the data should be used or be made some benefit, should bring some benefit to different stakeholders. And I'm not a legal expert, but what I always keep in mind that there is no data ownership. Yeah? There is not the data owner, but there are people who can say who should do what with the data. And that is a very important concept. So data sovereignty means that some people who have or should have the ability to tell what should be done with the data should be enabled to do that. So I believe the question of public versus private data, that is a very interesting question. We also had in Germany this kind of feasibility study on public data, which says, bring the data together in one platform and make it available for the farmers and the companies to really use it. So it's a question of data availability if the data should be used by third parties. And definitely, it is a tricky question how to really handle the data sovereignty. The Gaia X wants to make a contribution in that regard. You also saw that in my presentation that the data sovereignty topic is a very important one. I did digital transformation projects in many domains, but I have to say that the agricultural domain is really one area where we see a very, very strong emphasis by the farmers on the topic of the data sovereignty. So they want to be in the position to say, if it's their data from their field, from their farm, they want to be able to judge what should be done with that. And the one part is an organizational or a legal framework. The other part is the technical framework to ensure this kind of data sovereignty. And for that, technologies like data usage control and data sovereignty mechanisms can play a role.
Yeah, thank you. Bilal, I saw you raise your hand. Okay. So I have two more questions. One is for Jörg, because in my impression, this is something that I encounter in many other industrial fields as well. For example, in construction, but also in industrial production, that the digital twin is something that many people hold as a vision, which is a very nice vision, because if you have a sort of digital twin, then you are not only able to have good maintenance, but also to have good models for simulation, for example, for prediction. And how you mentioned this word as well in your presentation. So is this something for the application in agriculture where we can draw from the concepts that we find in all the other domains?
So we do some research in that direction since some years, because we are very active in the Industry 4.0 community, and there the digital twin concept and the asset administration shells and all these kind of concepts are pretty common. And we believe that the digital twin concept can be of high value in the agricultural domain as well, but it comes with additional questions towards standardization and technological compatibility. We heard this interoperability topic from the keynote to all the talks that we heard today again and again. So this will be a challenge. So just saying we use a digital twin will not solve our problems. But relating this question that you asked to the last one, we also think that the digital twin is a very good means to come up with a good data sovereignty answer, because it's much easier to reason about, for my field, who should have access to which data, who should be allowed to use data for certain purposes, and if I want to make that in a general statement about my data or my services. So the thinking in the digital twins of an animal or a field can also support this data sovereignty point. But yes, we should not invent the wheel from scratch. We should really take a very close look what the other kind of domains like construction or industry do, and get some inspiration from there.
Thank you. I only have 1 minute left for this session. So Jim, I have one question for you, and I have to ask you for a very, very quick answer. So you've been talking about acceleration and digital transformation towards digital agriculture. Is acceleration actually a crucial criterion here?
I think it is. The world is changing. You know, climate change is a real issue. Feeding more people with less is a real issue, and we just don't have the privilege of taking our time. We gotta speed things up.
Thank you. That was a very nice wrap up already. What you just said for the session. We have to speed up things. So I don't want to lose much or many more words on that. I just want to draw your attention to tomorrow's focus group. I really invite you all all the attendants, all the speakers to attend this focus group meeting as well. I think it will be a very good step forward towards the digital transformation of agriculture. And with that, I would like to close this session and wish you a nice day.
Thank you, Dr. Boss, for taking us through session 2. And thank you for really cementing the importance of standardization, which leads us to the meeting tomorrow, which we hope that all of you will attend. So we will now move to the last leg of this webinar, for which I would like to give the floor to Dr. Bilal Jamusi, who is the Chief of the ITUT Study Group Department. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Maitli. Distinguished moderators, panelists, and participants. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-organizers, the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, for their strong commitment to highlighting the importance of digital agriculture and the use of emerging technologies within this domain. I would like to also thank all the diligent participants who have joined us today. While we embrace the digital era, it is essential to ensure that the advantages of digital transformation trickle down across verticals in the smart city ecosystem. The process of digital transformation, when applied within the agricultural sector, seeks to connect farmers and other relevant stakeholders to the digital economy with the aim of achieving a smarter and more sustainable future for food distribution and farming. As we have observed throughout the presentations today, the concept of digital agriculture builds on precision farming by steering us towards the adoption of frontier technologies like artificial intelligence, digital twin, UAVs, and IoT. Along with the interconnection of databases on seed characteristics, climatic and weather patterns, and soil conditions, which emphasizes the improvement of agriculture processes. The access to such databases empowers farmers and other relevant stakeholders to proactively make decisions to boost productivity and improve margins in the agricultural production, marketing, and supply channels. With access to the relevant data, farmers are also able to monitor and predict risks related to climatic variability, food wastage, and other crop variables. During today's webinar, we saw a diverse range of use cases on this topic, and it is also delightful to see our sister agencies, including WMO and FAO, employing these digital technologies to monitor climate variations and food supply chains to support agriculture in developing countries. The expansion of this domain is particularly important for developing countries and least developed countries, which may still have a predominantly agrarian economy. To expand our understanding of this domain and to bring together relevant expertise and knowledge transfer for boosting digital agriculture, the ITUT Study Group 20 on IoT, smart cities, and communities established the focus group on artificial intelligence and Internet of Things for digital agriculture, shortly named FGAI4A, together with FAO. In keeping with its scope, Focus Group AI4A will examine how to leverage emerging technologies, including AI and IoT, to support data collection and handling, improve modeling, and provide communication channels for interventions for effective agricultural production processes. The use cases presented during today's webinar will feed into the work of this new focus group, which will hold its first meeting tomorrow, 30th of March, for 2 days. My colleagues will include additional details on how to participate in the chat. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-chairs of the focus group AI4A, Dr. Rami Fethi from the National Telecom Regulatory Authority, Egypt, and Dr. Sebastian Bus from the Fraunhofer Institute for the commendable leadership rendered to this new focus group. I would also like to thank the Vice Chairman, Mr. Chunlin Pang, TIAA, China, Mr. Dongqing Chang, FAO, Dr. Gumyang Lee, Republic of Korea, and Dr. Paulo Gemma, Huawei Technologies. The collective insights and guidance received from this distinguished focus group management team has set the trajectory for exemplary work to be done by FGAI4A in the field of digital agriculture. I'll now conclude my closing remarks and wish you a fruitful first meeting for the focus group on AI for agriculture, artificial intelligence and Internet of Things for digital agriculture. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Jamusi, for the closing remarks and for wrapping up what we discussed in today's webinar. Before we officially close the session for today, we would like you to stay tuned and check out the Digital Transformation for Cities and Communities webpage for the upcoming webinars. We would also like to announce that we're holding the STI Forum side event on building people-oriented cities through digital transformation on 6 May. We'll circulate further information on these events. So thank you all, and we hope to see you all tomorrow for the first focus group meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.